Hello, welcome to the February 20th, 2026 Club Cubase livestream. My name is Greg Undo, and I'm the host of the livestream today. If you have not attended a livestream before, how it works is you can ask questions in the live chat field or send questions in advance to Club Cubase at Steinberg.de. Let me just stop my monitoring computer. Or you can send questions to Club Cubase at Steinberg.de. When asking questions, if you could specify realize that my ability to answer questions in a real-time manner may soon be eclipsed. So if you don't see an immediate response to your question, we will go through all the questions chronologically as asked. And when asking questions, if you could indicate which version of Cubase it is, if it's 13, 14, 15, if it is going to be on Mac or Windows platform, and which level. So if it's Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro, that information is helpful. We should have an index of all topics that are discussed in today's live stream pinned to the top of the comments field with timestamps so you can quickly navigate. And if you want to search for topics that have been covered in previous live streams, you can go to cubaseindex.com, and we want to thank Jan for creating that site. We also have two people that serve as moderators. We have Jazz Dude and Agent K. They're not Steinberg employees. They just make it a better community experience, and we appreciate their efforts. And we'll also give a special thanks to Jazz Dude for his work with the unofficial Cubase Nation Discord. So it's a wonderful resource of information for people in the Steinberg community. So once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America, and I primarily focus on Steinberg products, and I'm the host today. So if all right, and I'm presenting from just outside of Washington, D.C. area in Alexandria, Virginia, United States. So if you're on this live, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. Sorry, my voice is a little rough today. I have a bit of a cold. I feel fine. Just my voice and throat's a little scratchy, so I apologize for my voice sounding rough. We'll see how. I should hopefully have a couple cough drops and some water to drink through the live stream, so hopefully that will help. And with that, we will go ahead and get started. All right, Blue Screen Music asks, I'm using the Splice Bridge plugin to try out drum loops in Cubase. When I select one and drag it in, the tempo no longer matches my project. What am I doing wrong? So I've never used this Splice Bridge plugin. I don't have a Splice account. I should probably get one. But make sure that when you are dragging any file in, if you know, so it may preview kind of in the project tempo, but make sure like when you actually drag a file in and you select the particular file, make sure that you have musical mode activated here. So you could just activate that directly in the particular info line, or if you wanted to also activate musical mode, if you hit Control or Command plus the letter P, like for pool, you could open up, get the right keyboard, you could activate musical mode here as well. So you see musical mode, and you could place a little check to put an X in the musical mode box. So make sure that that particular event is in musical mode, and maybe if other people have used Splice Bridge, if they have any insights, that would be helpful. All right, is it Lucius Beat 17 asks, hey Greg, can you explain how to master LUFS? Which effect should I put the master channel, or should I use a different tool for mastering? Often, if you want a dedicated mastering package, you could check out something like Wavelab, where you could actually export to particular known LUFS levels. But let's say if we have a master file here, she was my kind of cute, I like the way she smiled, she was gonna stay here, and I wanted this to go to a specific LUFS value, what you could do is just simply select the event, go to your audio, let's go to processes, to normalize, and then when you go to normalize, you could actually choose to be it in two different scales. So you could have it in decibels or loudness units. So now, let's say if I wanted to do this particular song, I could say, let's make this, if I want to do it for like most music streaming services, I could just type in -14 here. And if we watch the actual level of the amplitude of the waveform, we can now just have that amplitude automatically take into effect right there. So you could actually, you don't need any special plugins to, LUFS is just a loudness unit full scale. So it's a measure of kind of the loudness, similar to what RMS scales were. But you could just simply normalize directly to a particular loudness level through the normalize function there. All right, we see Klaus joining from Malmo. Great to have you on. We see Tim K from Zeist in the Netherlands, whose cat buddy is waving a paw hello to my cat Steven, and Mark Graben's dog Stella. Okay, so we see Angeli Lucius, hi, how to automate BPM and volume of a track so that it is slowing down at the end and gets quieter. Okay, so let's take a look at like this particular track here.
She said, I'm just looking for tonight. She said, I don't want no man who wants to treat his lady.
So if I put on my metronome,
she was just looking for tonight.
So what I want to do is do a quick, then let's say I'll just make this go like to the, we'll make it as long. So let's say we'll take this particular.
Checking me, checking around.
All right, so now what I want to do is come over here. Let's first do our tempo detection of the file. So if it has like fluctuating tempo, we want to go to your tempo track, and let's do our tempo detection. So analyze. Okay, and now we're going to just take a quick listen.
Checking around. She said, I'm not looking. She said, I don't want no man.
Yeah, one more time.
To treat his lady right. Oh no. She was just looking for tonight. Who wants to treat his lady right?
Let's do octave correction.
No. She was just looking for tonight.
All right, so now we want to come over here, and let's say we want to, like where we're starting off is we want to put in like a 4/4 time signature here.
She was at the bar drinking a stout.
So let's say, okay, this is, we'll put in 4/4 here. Okay, so now what we want to do to this particular file or multiple files is come over. We want to take these particular tempo changes and embed them into the file. So we're going to go to audio. Let's go to advanced, and we'll say set definition from tempo. Okay, and what this is going to allow us to do is to basically take that particular file. So let's say right where like these last bars, what I want to do is to kind of slow that particular tempo down. I'm going to move this track to the top, and we'll move our tempo track up so we have a little more space here. All right, so what I want to do now is I'm going to take from this measure here, and I want to kind of keep those same levels of fluctuation. And if I go to the upper right-hand corner, I could just kind of slow down the tempo here. So take a look. So let me just do that one more time because I think I may have messed up. Okay, so it's going to take Okay, so we'll take this tempo here. Okay, so at this point we want to, let's say right from this point in the audio file, again, I'll just slow down the tempo, so we'll do retard here. And as we do this, we should see the let me just undo that. I'm just going to redo that one more time. Sorry about that. So let's do our tempo detection. I'm just going to bounce this so it's a separate file since we trimmed it. Okay, so project menu to tempo track.
For a friend, she said that I'm just looking for tonight. She said I don't want.
Okay.
And she said I'm not looking for a friend. She said I'm just looking for tonight.
All right, so let's take this and again to advanced to set definition from tempo. Right, and then we're going to slow down. So now we have our
Looking for tonight.
I'll make it a more dramatic slowdown. All right, now let's do just an automation for level. So I can grab my volume automation, and let's just take that, and where we did the tempo change, I just want to now fade that out as the tempo is doing a retard.
Just looking for tonight.
So that's what you could do. So do a, if it's the tempo is fluctuating, select the event, project to tempo track to tempo detection. Listen to it. You may have to do an offbeat correction like I did here. At that point, select the event, audio to advanced to set definition from tempo. And that basically applies these particular tempo changes and embeds them into the audio file. Select the tempo. You could just simply slow down. You could draw in a new tempo and then add an automation point and just simply have it fade out so that you can go from the normal fluctuating tempo to a retard and a fade out. So let me know if that's helpful for you. All right. All right, so we see Stefan joining from Sweden. Thanks for joining. All right, so we see from G. Mitch who asks, hi Greg, can you do a tempo detection of a stereo mix and then drag a drum loop to a track and copy it to the length of the track? When I go to copy the loop, the cursor is on time warp. Right. So the first thing so we're going to take like this particular example here. So it's
looking for a friend. She said, I'm just looking.
And let's find a quick drum loop. Something totally inappropriate. All right, so now I want this particular drum loop. We're going to start it like on the beat here. Now, so when doing that, you may want to make sure that you just switch to the selection tool. We're going to make sure that this is in musical mode, and then I'm just going to go to the right center edge and drag it across. And now we do this. We'll have our audio kind of playing directly there. So now we can.
Want no man who wants to treat his lady right. Oh no, she was just looking for tonight. The way she walks to come and get it.
Let me just find something that might be. Something that's maybe closer in tempo that's programmed. Okay, so we're about like one. Let me just make sure I have this on the grid here. So now this will automatically follow the tempo of our 2-track.
I'm not looking for a friend. She said, I'm just looking for tonight. She said, I don't want no man who wants to.
So this is the tempo that was detected from this file.
She was just looking for tonight.
And now this loop, once it's in musical mode, will automatically speed up and slow down to match the existing tempo there. All right. All right. And so we see Jazz Dude posting links to the new Groove Agent 6. All right, we see Jan from Cubase Index giving kudos to Jazz Dude for the unofficial Cubase Nation Discord. So we see I'm in a drop says, hi Greg, I'm interested in buying a CC1. Is it possible to use the fader to control CC1 modulation and CC11 and quickly switch back to the volume fader? There's not much information available. So I think it may be, I don't think that it could be remapped. I haven't gotten my unit yet, but I think that it's going to be fixed to volume. So I don't think that it's designed to switch back and forth between different MIDI CCs, but I can't say for sure. Hopefully I should be getting it over the weekend, so maybe Tuesday I could have an answer. All right, so we see John Barry checking in from the English Riviera. Thanks for joining us. All right. So you see from Jazz Dude, he activated his Absolute 7 also yesterday. Thanks, Greg. So you're welcome. Let me know if you got, just make sure you got email I sent you. All right. Tim Weinheimer says, hello, all. Nice to see Absolute 7. All right. So we have Non-Delusional from Newport, Rhode Island checking in. Just saying, hey, Greg, thanks for joining us. Willa Wonder 8854 says, I'm Willa coming from Zambia. Thanks for joining us. And we have Frank from Germany as Dakor. Tony Tronzo from Australia. Thanks for joining us in the middle of the night. All right, Deja2946 asks, use the range selection tool to raise the gain of a particular section of a WAV file. If down the road I want to delete that edit, how do I do that? Okay, so let's say if I'm here, let's adjust our gain structure of this. So now if I come over there, so all right, so I see this. I'm going to select that, and I think if we go to the audio menu, you can say remove event volume curve, and then so anytime that if you want to come over here, we could just say, so if we just come here, let's say, okay, we want this to be loud, we want this to be soft. So, and if you wanted to undo that, so select the event, get a audio to remove event volume curve, and then you could go back to square one. Also, if it's like where you have multiple ones, so let's say if I do this and I just want to delete, let's say just this one, if I come here, you could also just split. So I just hit Shift X and we split that, and let's come over here, and if we want to do the remove event volume curve, let's see if we can do it just for that particular section. Yeah, so we could do it as a section, but you may have to split the events if you wanted to, if you had multiple event volume curves simultaneously on a particular audio file. All right, wonderful to see Steve Leach checking in from Berkeley, California. Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas. He says winter has returned a little bit. All right, so we have a question from Fanaton. Hi, Greg. Can you please explain what algorithms such as elastic or standard mean? All right, so like as I come over here, like when we did the time stretching. So we just took this particular audio file and we time stretched it, or we changed the pitch. Now to get that to happen in real time, that employs an algorithm. So when we want to select a particular file, we could come over, let me just make the algorithm a little, so we'll come over here, and then we could select different algorithms for doing this. So previous versions of Cubase, when we did real-time time stretching, we had these particular algorithms to do that. Now, many companies use algorithms from a company called Z-Plane based out of Berlin, and that they have generated the elastic algorithms. So these are arguably higher quality algorithms, and people go, why do we have the kind of legacy algorithms? And that's for project compatibility. And then when we look at the algorithms, we can see kind of three different families of three algorithms. So we have based on time, and that could be more geared towards rhythmic pitch. We could think of as more harmonically rich vocals, guitars, pianos, bass. And then we have tape, and tape would allow us to, as we slow down, to have the tape almost like we're affecting. So if I switch this algorithm to tape, what we could do is, as we slow down, it's going to act like an analog tape machine. So as we come over here, so just like we're slowing down a tape machine. So we have kind of time for rhythmic stuff, pitch, and tape. Now we also have formant preservation, so if you wanted to work with preserving formant so that as you're working with it, it doesn't sound like it's being chipmunked if you're pitching something. And then if you have older computers, there's efficient algorithms. So these will allow you to work on older computers that don't have as much audio processing power. It's really not needed as much, but those are what the different algorithms allow you to do, is for pitch shifting and time stretching of your audio. All right, and we have the second part of the question. Okay, and we see, what does quarter note versus clock means in the inspector? All right, so this is time and linear mode. So just go to new project, and we'll show the differences here. Okay, so we'll just grab a quick loop here. All right, so let's say now I'm going to take this particular clip over here. We'll move it to bar 1. All right, so when we have musical versus linear mode, and I'm going to take this to a different track here. All right, so right now we have our tempo set to 120 beats per minute. This, when I copied the files over, are in musical mode. So let me just move that up. Okay, so now when I adjust, because our track is in, I'm going to put this track in musical mode, but this track in linear mode. Now where it makes a difference is when we place events, whether we want these events to be on kind of our bar and beat position, or if we want these events to be based on their time position. So I'm going to add a ruler track. As we add our ruler track, I'm going to switch this to seconds. So I can see that we have bars and beats here, but seconds in the bottom. So we can see, okay, here's roughly 8 seconds. So what I'm going to do now is, when I adjust my tempo, so let's say we go from 120 beats a minute to 100 beats a minute. If we look at our time representation, this file that's in musical mode will stay at the same time, and this file that's in linear mode will stay at this will stay at the same bar and beat position, and this will stay at the same time position. So I adjust my tempo. So when we do this, we can see that our time hasn't changed, but so as I adjust my tempo again, we can see that the relative time position is going to be the same, but when it's in linear mode, the events are based on their actual time position. But musical mode means that the events will stay at their particular bar and beat position. Now, where this is handy is, let's say we were scoring for a film, and I had a particular sound that happened every time that this, this sign blinked, and I wanted to have like a little bing type sound. So I could place that bing sound to always be at that specific time, and then if I change the tempo, if that track is in linear mode, that position stays at that same time position, but the other tracks that are musical mode will now speed up and slow down based upon the actual tempo. So linear mode, the events will start at the particular time position. So if we adjust the tempo, it stays at the same time position. Musical mode, when we adjust the tempo, it still stays at the same time, at the same bar and beat position. So let me know if that's helpful. Okay. So we see English Boy says, "Hi Greg, please suggest to Steinberg to add a lock on Notepad choice to enlarge text and highlight different colors." So let's say if we go to our Notepad, so let's say I just come here. My great tracking notes. So someone mentioned one time, let me see if I could zoom in and out with. Yeah, I thought I read somewhere once where someone thought that they could kind of change the font size. Now what you can do is obviously if you go to export, we could say we want to export the Notepad data. So let's say if I have my notes on a particular track, just in case they're not. So now if we export your Notepad data, you could export it as a text file. And then you could obviously change it, but I'll pass it along. It may not be the highest priority, but regardless, I'll pass it on. All right, wonderful. See Parabot 2 joining from Australia. All right, so we see from Chiluminaire says how to apply a chaos style underwater effects only to specific section of the chorus and limited to selected tracks such as vocal and keys without affecting the rest of the mix. Okay, so let's come over here. Let me just open up a quick project. So I think we could do this with direct offline processing. All right, and I'll just render the piano as an audio file. Okay, so let's say I have kind of a full so say I want to put let me just hide this particular track. So I'll just select these, I want to select the range here of these tracks. All right, so I'm going to go to my offline processing. So go to audio to direct offline process, or we can just go directly to plugins. So let's put on a flanger. And let's make it a bit. So now as we do this, so we'll take just our normal file here. And then as we come over here, what we just selected will now run through kind of a flanger. But the other tracks are unaffected. So let's say I want to do like a delay here on this, my piano. So now we're going to come out. So again, go to audio, to plugins. So whatever you just kind of select, you can just come right over here and say, okay, I want to select just that and go to audio, to plugins, and then you could just process, and then you could always just come right over here and just choose to delete all of the processing. Just like that. So just kind of select, you know, the regions that you want with the range tool and go to audio, to plugins, and then even after saving the project, you could always go right back directly to where you were. All right, so we see just a comment, and this may be with the Splice bridge from Daja 2496. It says, sometimes I found that what does import over to Cubase is the number of bars per clip. So in addition to being sure your clip is in musical mode, try modifying the number of bars as well. And you could do that by going directly into, if we double click, we go into the sample editor to definition. Here you could set the number of measures as well. So you could say how many measures are in that particular clip. All right. Great to see Steinberg MIDI on. See Richard Carpenter 7 says, thank you for the lessons. So you're welcome. Thanks for being a part of the community today. All right. Wonderful to see Beverly Beatty on from Vancouver. Sorry, my chat field jumped. All right, so we have Virtual Alan checking from Scotland. New Memento from Finland. All right, so we have Terry Lee Bolton joining from Nashville. Hope you're well. Thanks for joining us today. Terry Gray says, Absolute 7 is amazing. Having a blast with the new Groove Agent. All right, so Fred Design 4989 says, hi Greg, Pro user on Windows. Can you explain to me why the musical random mode in the drum pattern editor, when hitting random, why put the computer, a closed hi-hat and open hi-hat on the same starting point? Probably because it's random, but let's go ahead and we'll take a look at it. So we'll just quickly add a drum track. Let's just add one more. Okay, so when we come over here and we want, all right, so let's say if we go to our hi-hat closed, I want this to be like every second. I want kick to be every fourth. All right, so now if we come here, All right, so if we go to closed, if we just kind of come over here, because it is random by design, we could come over here. And one of the cool things is that you could also just come over and kind of shift the particular notes. So it doesn't really take into account necessarily the exclusivity of hi-hats, because a lot of times you may have multiple hi-hats and shakers going on. But if you want to just come here, we'll select, let's say, our hi-hat. Let's say if we wanted this to be, let's say to hi-hat open, you could just kind of come right over here. And let's say if I just select this particular lane, so, just because, random is random, so it's not necessarily going to differentiate, if you wanted to have like, an exclusive polyphony on a hi-hat, so we could do stuff like that in Groove Agent, where it will, be within a particular group, but, for the drum pattern editor, it is, truly random with that, but you could easily kind of change it around. Okay, so we see Michael Teams has granted me 1 gallon of Rocky Road ice cream. Thank you for that. All right, so Fred Design asks, is there a way to lock the drum pattern lanes when hitting random again? I want some lanes to stay the way they are. So there isn't a way that I know of to kind of lock the patterns. But what you could do is just simply, when you see the pattern here, is just duplicate the pattern. And now I could just come right over here and say, okay, let's just randomize this one particular sound. So and then if we wanted to have kind of more density in the randomization, so you could have this be completely kind of or Euclidean. And when you're doing Euclidean, you can see often that you have the ability to kind of easily kind of shift different things. But if you wanted to, you could have one pattern here and then just switch to completely different pattern. And then you could just simply go back to pattern 1, have a variation, and duplicate that pattern. And then just kind of easily switch back and forth between and kind of build up like pattern variation groups. Or if you want to experiment, just simply at that point, just choose to, duplicate the pattern, and then you could work freely and still keep your existing pattern as is. All right, wonderful to see George checking in from Germany. We have John Costigan joining from Kenosha, Wisconsin. We have Soren from Sweden checking his East Street 3956. me see, Soren. Checking in is Sir N68. So we just see Cliff Share just says, "Hi Greg, is there a way to distribute the voices of say 4-voiced chord to single instrument tracks from melody to bass?" Yeah, in the score editor there is an explode function. So if we want, let me just open up that project real quick. All right, so let me. So if you have something that looks kind of like this, if you just go to your score editor and go to functions to explode. So we can say, let's do 2 new tracks. Number of new tracks, we'll say 3. We'll preserve our original track and hit OK. And then we could just, as we come over here, you could just do the explosion right there. So just go in the score editor. And just go to score functions explode. All right, so we have John Koutalinas joining from the UK. Thanks for joining us. Let's see. John Costigan's received 1 gallon of Mexican hot chocolate ice cream. Great to see Steinberg MIDI on. Jazz Dude says, "Someone please make Greg a chamomile tea." Sounds good. Tim Weinheimer just says, "So many cool things you can do with a song in Cubase 15. All right, so we have VS Terra Nova joining from Amsterdam. We have Soul Sound Official just wishing everyone a happy Friday. All right, we have Moth. It says, "Thank you, Steinberg, for everything. I'm always proud to be able to represent them for the U.S. market." Bratman Studio asks, "Hey Greg, did you upgrade to 15.0.1? What is that update?" So there's like maintenance, mostly kind of maintenance aspects, some additional features and functions as well. And we just also see, and if you wanted to check like the version history, there's a lot of like bug fixes. And we also see just comment from Rick saying Absolute 7 has some wonderful things in it. Yeah, if you haven't already checked out, I think it's the new, especially the FM Lab presets. I thought those were really spectacular, that library. You see from Steinberg MIDI says new Groove Agent looks fire. All right, so we see Val checking in from Vienna, Austria. All right, so Val is just asking, is Extreme mono by default? I somehow can't find a mono poly switch. 1 mouse away from happiness, maybe. So I think it is a single voice instrument, But if it's so there's, I think, one voice of polyphony on that. And if you're talking about, I think you can deal with stereo files, but it's a single voice monophonic instrument. Okay, so IS67 asks, hi Greg, I need click for metronome as MIDI part, not as rendered to audio. Thanks. Okay. So let's take a look at a particular project here. All right, so I believe in this project we're in 6/8. Okay, so let's say if we go to our signature track here, going to add a signature track, and we see that we are in 6/8. I'm going to just select like the piano, which is kind of encompassing, and hit P to set my left and right locators. So if we go to project menu to signature track, we could say render an audio click between the left and right locators, but we could also, in the same area, just come right over here to our signature track and render a MIDI track between the left and right locators. Now, when I do this, I could actually, let's say I want it to be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I could change my click pattern here. So now when I go to render a MIDI click, I will come right over here. So signature track to render MIDI click. So now when we look at our click track, we can now just have our MIDI click track as well. So again, just go to set the left and right locators around where you want the MIDI click track to be placed. Project, signature track, render as MIDI click, render MIDI click between locators. All right, Chiluminaire asks, what's the best way to experiment with different drum patterns and solo phrases over my composition when they're in a different BPM or key? And how can I quickly match tempo and transpose them? All right, so let's say if we were doing, we'll just do a quick new project here. Okay, so we're going to have this particular track here. So I auditioned it in musical mode because I had this turned on. So now we'll just do like 16 bars of that. So, and let's go ahead and find perhaps a, let's say maybe a bass part. All right, now we also can come over here and there's a function called the project root key. So you may have to right click and turn this on. So I could say, okay, my project root key, I want it to be in D. So now when I come over here, we could actually say, okay, I want to audition my loops with the project root key. Okay, so let's say now I want, so we'll have this playing. All right, so let's say. All right, so let's say we have this going on now. So my drums and bass, and I put this into the key of D. Now I could also have a function here for like drum parts, and usually drum parts you'll have a global transpose, so we could just say independent. So if I want to come over here, and I'm going to switch my key to say F sharp. So I'm going to put this to follow. All right, so as we do this, I could say. Now let's put it to the key, our project root key to D. So now my loops aren't changing, my drums aren't changing volume. So if I go to A, now the kind of the loops are kind of tonality based with pitch. I can change those, and those would automatically change and follow based on the project root key. And if we wanted to transpose, let's come over here, we could add what's called a transpose track. And I could say, okay, I want this to go down to semitones. And then we'll go back up. So let's say if we just had our so now it's transposed. It's going to go back to the original key. So we could transpose globally using the transpose track as well. Just let me know if that's helpful. And with all these, I could just come over here. And if I just put in a different tempo, let's say we're at 120, I want it to be 100. Whatever tempo you put in, because they are in musical mode, it will automatically follow those tempo changes as well. Okay. Michael Team says somebody should get me some Oreo cookies. All right, IH67 says, thanks again, Greg. Can smooth variable tempo track statistically as an average function? So let's say if we had, let's see if this was, okay, so let's say if we had our tempo track here, and you wanted to smooth it, can smooth variable temp track statistically as an average function. So if you wanted to just come here, and if we go to the kind of the right center edge, we can kind of smooth out the tempo just by holding down the left mouse button and making adjustments there. So let's say if I have a number of tempo changes and I wanted those to be kind of averaged out, I could just simply select those tempo events, go to the right center edge, and then we could increase and adjust kind of the smoothing of the tempo if you wanted to, or make it more dramatically different tempo wise. Okay, Ekenderdag asks, could you please explain what the purpose of the track delay slider is when there is automatic delay compensation happening already? There's a lot of people, like my friend Michael Wagner, would use it all the time just to, so when you come over here, we said that the track delay compensation is, all of the plugins have plugin delay compensation. I know I've seen a lot of people that will take kick tracks and drum tracks and because maybe they want the compressor to hit a little bit differently, or let's say they, what you could do is just come over here and adjust kind of the pre-delay so that this track will play a little bit earlier so that you could have a slow attack on a compressor but still have the transient kind of lined up. So if you need it to, and what this will do is basically take this particular track and slide it back in time on playback. So a lot of people, when you're stacking like multiple kick drums and they want to have different attack rates on a compression, but they still want the transient to kind of be on beat, they may simply slide the track to playback a little bit earlier. So often that function isn't going to be to try to make up for delay compensation in particular tracks, because Cubase will do that for you automatically. But some people will choose to do it as a intentional decision to have different attack rates on Dynamics plugins as well. All right, wonderful to see Craig Sibley checking in from Washington State. He says he's here late, but gleaning new stuff. Thank you. So thanks for joining us today. All right, so we have a question from Deemster78. It says, hi, Deemy from Belgium here. Can you explain the logic of starting point of an event? For example, when I'm cutting an event, it sometimes shifts to the right and therefore not snapping correctly. So it could be, so let's say if you're doing an audio cut here, all right, so if we do a cut and you notice that we'll zoom in, let's say in this particular track, and I want to cut here. So, let's say if you wanted to cut, I'll just take my snap off. You can kind of cut where you want, but it could also be based upon the zero crossing point. So let's say if I undo that edit, and now if I have zero crossing turned on, and you may have to simply extend this over a little bit in 15. Most people leave this on all the time. Notice that I can't cut everywhere. Like I can't cut in the middle. I could cut kind of before that waveform or after that waveform, just dependent upon that it's only going to cut at a zero crossing point. So now when we come here, it's only going to cut at a zero crossing point. So it says when I'm cutting an event, it sometimes shifts to the right, therefore not snapping correctly. So let me know if that's it. I've also saw kind of with MIDI editing. if it's a MIDI event, so let's say if I'm here and I have this, and I'm looking at, let's say, measures 36 through 51, and if this sync is turned on, so where we're seeing that together, that if I make a cut here, that it could sometimes go earlier. So that may shift. So if it's for a MIDI event, you could try to just simply come over here and then just see if you could cut freely if it's not exposed to be synchronized with the particular event. So if it's a MIDI event, try to turn that off. And then, I've seen sometimes where it may shift to go earlier or later because it's trying to synchronize the view with the editor screen below. All right, so we see from Val, it just says, thanks, Greg. I'll duplicate it and send different tracks to different instances. All right, so we see from Craig Sibley, just says, dang, I got a call. I have to leave already. It says, Greg sent you an email, but haven't heard back. I'd be interested to know if you have any Dorco users who might be able to proof a score for me. I don't think I saw the email. I'll take another look on it as well. Probably the best place to look would be like in the Dorco forum. So if you go there, there's probably people that would do it. I know on Facebook that there's kind of a music engraving group that people often post their scores on to see if they, if they have any thoughts on how to make it more legible for musicians to read. All right, so we have Alex checking in from Lake Havasu, Arizona. All right, so Cliff Scherer just says, hi, Greg, how can I program quintuplet or septuplets MIDI in Cubase? All right, so let's come over here. All right, so right now I'm just going to put this into like into step entry mode. So I'm going to just hit some notes on my MIDI keyboard, and as I do this, we'll see quarter notes entered in because that's our quantized value. Okay, so if I wanted to put in quintuplets or septuplets, what I could do is we'll just come over here. Let's go to my quantize settings. All right, and so I'll just open up my quantize panel because we could see that a little easier. Is it here? Let me just. Okay, so quantize tuplet. So now I'll just say, let's do quintuplets. So now as I play in, and let me make this, we'll change the value here to like half note quintuplets. So now we could have 5 notes within 2 beats. So if I want to say, okay, let's just do straight. So now we have 5 even divisions within the bar. So we have 1 bar. Let's say now I want to do septuplets. So now we have 5 notes here. We have 7 equal divisions here. Let's say I want to do 11 tuplet. So now we have 11 notes fitting in within one particular measure. So if you're doing kind of, the fastest way is just to do step entry, open up the quantize settings, and under quantize tuplets, change that to whatever tuplet value you want. So now we have 5 chords as quintuplets within one measure. So we see Luminaire just says mind-blowing, thanks. All right, Barebones NW1 says hi, so thanks for joining us. All right, so we have a question from Steve Green who asks, hi Greg, I have an audio event split into many parts. Is there a way of selecting them all to extract the MIDI? I seem to only be able to do one at a time. Thanks. Okay. Okay, so let's say if I have my kick track here, and I want to split it, every event, hold down my Alt or Option key. So let's say we split all of these. Okay, and so we'll go to our hit points and see if we could do this. Yeah, you might have to. So let's say if we come over here and let's see if we, sometimes in situations like this, what you could do is maybe do a duplicate track version. And then if we, let's say, join all these events together. And then we make MIDI notes that we could see that. And then we could just go right back to our original data where each one was chopped up. So I think that's going to do one at a time. But if you do a track version and glue the events together and then do. So here we do take this, just glue the events together. So this way we still have our original. And then when we double click here, we go into the sample editor and create MIDI notes, and then you just have kind of an alternate version that you could go back to without any consequences. All right, Soul Sound Official just says, hi Greg, question, I was trying to clean the system from duplicated drivers, etc. Should let the generic low latency ASIO and the built-in ASIO driver while using the Apollo Twin driver. Thanks. You're always going to have like kind of those drivers for any audio interface, and most people would use those particular drivers for the built-in audio interface on your system. But if I had an Apollo or an audio interface that had a dedicated ASIO driver, I would choose to use that. So the other ones aren't really going to, there's nothing bad about having those drivers available if, you're taking, you connect a different audio interface, or if it's a laptop and you want to work adjust with headphones so that you could still continue to work. There's no problems with that, and I think those drivers are very small and negligible in size. Jazzoot's also bringing up a point about most orchestral samples need a negative track delay as well. Yeah, just based on the instrument itself. It's a great point. All right, so we see from Ekenderdag says, I find the audio alignment feature to be a bit hit or miss. When I'm using it with vocals to line up 2 takes of the same vocal, the warping is often off and not lined up at all. What am I missing? So I generally had pretty good luck with it. I'll show an example here. All right, so say you'll listen to this example. All right, so say I want all these background vocals to align to this. So we're going to open the alignment panel. So I'm going to choose this as my reference. And I'll choose all these others as my target. I'm just going to say match words, prefer time shifting. I'll choose 100%. And now I'll align the audio. And as we do that, you can see visually. So if I undid that alignment, if we redo it, so if I've had kind of really good luck anytime something's kind of in the ballpark. If it's something it's like 2 beats off, it might be out of the design intention, but if something's kind of in the ballpark, that tends to work well for me. But let me know if I'm doing it differently than you are. All right, so we see from Deemster78 says, thank you, not what I meant. Kind of hard to explain. An audio event, the starting point, the little square with the S, isn't always at the visible start of the event. Okay, so let's say if we're here, so I'm not sure if it's when we come here if it's the snap point that you're referring to, like in the sample editor. So that could depend on there's a setting that could affect that. Let me just see if I but there's like 3 modes of visibility, and one of them. So I think if we go here to this icon, so if we say, that might be different. But there's different clip editing modes. I think one of those, so if it's like this particular one, let me just, don't think that's it. But check to see, because I think there's one of the clip editing modes. If you come here, let me just try it on a new project, see if it makes a difference. But there is, I thought it was, so, but let me know if it's this, but I think it's like one of these clip editing modes you might have to change. Let me just see if because one of the modes will hide the snap point. So, but let me know if it's the snap point that you're not seeing. But let me just take another look, see if I could. Okay, I think this is it. So we say, so if it's set here to show clips and events, then we see this snap point. So where we see almost like this little icon here, but if it's just to show clips, then we don't see the sync point. So look kind of right here. So you have to have like the events chosen here in the sample editor. So let me know if that's kind of what you're missing. All right, DJ Eric Vox, who I believe is from Ireland, if memory serves right, says, hello, Greg. Why, when I try to detect chords from a song which is on a grid by the tempo and convert them to new MIDI track, they are not quantized. I always have to do the quantize after. So a lot of times the chords themselves may be placed a little bit off. So let's come over. See if this changes chords. Okay. Okay, so when I come over here, let's say we have this in musical mode, so we're going to play it with the grid. So I'm going to add a chord track. So I think maybe if we just come over here, I think that, like, let's see if the chords themselves may be slightly off here. So I'm going to select the chords and hit Q. And now we will just say chords to MIDI. Let me just add. All right, so we have that. So let's come over here and we will say from project chord track, chords to MIDI. And now when we look at the MIDI data, we can see that now it's just, and we do that, we can see that the start points are now So now if I just, so try to, when you do that, so depending on, like the chord may not be fully defined, you know, until the second note is struck. So this, you know, so it may not, there may not be a chord, like in this example here, the kind of the arpeggiations going on. So the chord may not be defined until like the second note, but try to just, you know, select all of the particular events and hit Q. And then you could quantize the chords before extracting them and generating MIDI from that. All right, so you see Uno Memento wants people to whack the like button. Cliff Share says, thanks, Greg. These Cubase videos are super helpful for a beginner like me. Thanks for joining us on a Friday night in Germany. Okay, IES67 says, many thanks, Greg. Great answers. Hopefully many great questions as well. So try to help people. All right, Steve Green says, Greg, on the subject of MIDI, is there a way of overlapping an audio event over a MIDI track? I want to try this in a recent project, but couldn't. Thanks. You know, the only real way, you know, what you could do is just simply, you know, if you come over here, a lot of times what people do, there's an in-place editor. So if you hit Command or Control plus Shift plus I, you know, here we could, it's not overlapping, but you could basically open up the MIDI key editor directly on the project window here so that as we're working, you could kind of see direct correlation between those. What some people will do, and it doesn't work in all circumstances, is there's kind of a reference MIDI track in Very Audio. So let me just come over here. Let's activate this project. So if I'm doing like vocal tuning in Very Audio, so we'll come over here. You'll see like a MIDI reference track. So we'll say no MIDI reference. Let's say I want the piano, and then I could see kind of the piano notes so that when I choose to move a note, I could, you know, move a particular note to one of the pitches where the piano is, and I can see that as a reference, but there isn't a way necessarily to have like the audio superimposed in MIDI editor, but you can do a reference track for Very Audio if that's helpful. All right, wonderful. See Capped Energy Music joining from outside Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. All right, Elijah Brownie, or Brown New York, Brown YT says, hello, Greg. Question: will there be a Cubase app for Android and iPad? So there is an app called Cubases, and that's available for iOS and Android and Chromebook. So you can, it's a mobile version, so it's not necessarily exactly Cubase because it's a different experience doing it on your phone versus a computer, using your fingers versus a mouse. So if you want to, you know, start a project and have it be very Cubase-like, you could use Cubases, and then once, you know, a lot of times people may like capture their inspiration in Cubases, and we could now just come over here and just say, okay, we want to go to your file menu to import, and then you could just say import the Cubase project right into Cubase. So you could definitely work entirely in mobile. I was just reading Teddy Riley's biography, and he was talking about, like starting a project on mobile and importing it into Cubase for Lady Gaga project he was involved with. So yeah, people do it all the time. Okay, Richard Vandermeer, 3910. Hi, Greg. Do you know where I can find some fully mixed demo songs that will work with Cubase Artist? So I haven't tried these with Cubase Artist, but I'm inclined to think that if you go to the Steinberg download assistant, and take a look here. So let's say if you go to Cubase, mine will say Pro because that's a license I have, but check out demo projects and you'll probably see that you'll have different demo projects that are available for you here. So you'll see and if you go to 14, it may be just kind of at the very bottom. If you kind of scroll all the way down. But see if you have demo projects here. And I think that you could search on the website and download them directly from there as well. All right, so we see Ayesh just says, Greg, still I ask you, thanks again, invariable tempo when create MIDI event, one bar and duplicate, not fit well with the next bar, can be auto stretch as music node behavior. Okay, so let's go ahead and give it a try. We'll do brand new, so we'll do audio and we'll do MIDI as well, so. So I'll just import a quick audio file. Okay, so let's say, and I turn on some no click track with this. All right, so I'm going to go do my tempo map. All right, so let's come over here. Let's go to, I think we could just go straight 4/4 from the beginning. I don't think it's a pickup. All right, so let's say I want to go to Groove Agent SE. So let's get to our instrument track. Let's choose Groove Agent SE. All right. All right, so I will just kind of come over here. Let's just go to my player options. So I'll just hit play here. All right, I'm going to just do follow transport here. just program a quick beat here. Let's just make this 16. Here, I'll just program it in. All right, so I want to do one measure drum pattern. All right, and I'll switch this to our drum editor. All right, so let's say I want kick. All right, so let's put in, let's say, clap. All right, so let's say I'll just. All right, so we have our one measure drums, and we want this to be in musical mode. I'm going to drag this over. Now, where people can get messed up is, let's say, before I do the tempo detection, and I have a 1 bar drum loop here, and maybe this is kind of the confusion. All right, so let's say I want to create just a 1 bar drum loop. Okay, so let's say I do this, and so if you have the one measure drum loop in before, there's a little trick that you have to do. So I'm going to come over here. Let's make the drum map from the instrument. All right, so let's say I have this particular drum loop going on. All right, so let's say at this point, like I have this drum pattern, but I haven't done the tempo detection yet on the event. So what I would want to do before I do the tempo detection is to lock that particular track and lock that event. So now I'm going to do my tempo detection. So get a project. And now we will come over here to our tempo track. We'll do our tempo detection, analyze. Okay. So let's say I want this to be in 4/4. And I want my drums to come in on measure 2. So I'm going to unlock this particular event, and as I drag this out, because if I had that one measure of drums before and I did a tempo detection, all those MIDIs would be shifted based on the tempo. So now I'll take it off. So we have our fluctuating tempo. So if the MIDI data is there before you do the tempo detection, select it, lock the track. Because when you do the tempo detection, all the MIDI is going to shift and be off and then kind of be out of time. But if you lock it, then do the tempo detection, set your meter, and then unlock it, then that track will automatically play back. And this is following the meter, and it's the fluctuating tempo of the original track. So let me know if that's the problem. So, if the existing MIDI data is there, try to lock it and then before doing the tempo detection. Okay, Okay, so we see, thank you, Jazz Dude, for posting the direct download link for the demo projects. All right, so question, can I somehow play 2 projects synced? So you can have multiple projects open, but only one project active at a time. If you have 2 computers, you could run like a digital audio connection between the computers. You could run VST System Link to synchronize multiple computers, but not 2 projects active in Cubase at a time. All right, great to see Randy Lee music on. He's received 1 gallon of banana nut ice cream from Michael Teams. It's very generous. All right, John Barry's asking, in the new Groove Agent 6, do we have access to Acoustic Agent Expansion Kit instruments for use as layers? Example, use a Nashville kit snare and a Simon Phillips kit. Cheers. So I haven't really played with this much, but I think we could do it. So let's go to just add a new instance. I think this is only in the main, like the standalone Groove Agent, not SE version. So we'll come here. All right, so let's load up. Let's say Simon Phillips kit. Okay, so we'll come over. Let's get to our player. Okay, so let's come over to the kit itself. Okay, so now I think if we kind of select this, let's go to instruments. So we see now we could just come right over here. I'm going to mute the original snare here. So let's say we have, and then let's say we want to go to a Marco Miniman. I guess I don't have a license for it. So let's go to maybe a color punch. So I think if we click on the plus sign, all right, let's just, so now we are playing the different snare. So let's say I don't want a tom, I just want a snare. So we see like the little plus sign. We could just drag it right there and now switch between our different snares. So let's say, okay, I want to go to my vintage snare. Again, I could just So that's one of the coolest things, I think, because before, there's a lot of, like when you hit a snare drum in an acoustic agent kit, it's not only the snare drum, it's the snare drum that's in the room mics, it's in the overhead mics, it's in the other mics. So now you could just kind of drag and drop and so when you had in previous versions of Groove Agent until yesterday, you would have to load up a different instance of Groove Agent just to have the snare, but now you could, again, just take your Nashville kit and put a Simon Phillips snare in there. So, yeah, it's a great thing with Groove Agent 6. All right, so we see that Captain Energy Music's received 1 gallon of chocolate cherry mash ice cream, and Michael Teams wants everyone to whack the like button. All right, so we see from John Barry, he says, great, just what I wanted. 1 upgrade just sold. Cheers, Craig. Yeah. Yeah, I think they did a wonderful job with Groove Agent. All right, you see Jazz Dude posting a link to Cubase keyboard shortcuts. It's always great to have. All right, let me get to a couple questions that were mailed in. Okay, so we had a question, I believe it's from Beverly Beatty. It says, trying to stop my song at a measure 115. I've made edits to a song and made it shorter song in duration, so I don't need any more measures after measure 115. I want to erase the remaining measures in the project. I tried to delete time with the project ruler from 115 outwards, but it won't remove it, and cannot figure out, other than going into project settings and manually typing in the time in that window. Yeah, so let's take a look. Just open up a different project here. Just see if this is. All right, so say we want to stop our project. Let me just. All right, so one quick way of, setting it. So if you have kind of extra time in the project, you can, if you wanted to, if you just kind of right click here, you could go to seconds and say, okay, we're going to end at 3 minutes and 10 seconds. So if we want that to automatically, be the length of the project. So I could go here to my project duration, and we'll say, okay, I want this to be 31000. And now when I come over here, then it's going to be the length of the project. Usually when we're doing kind of a, if I want to delete time, that will kind of, delete from events, not necessarily empty spaces. But if you wanted to just, right click. So let's say if we go to your Shift S, by default, it gives you 10 minutes. If you need longer, it will automatically adjust to accommodate. So since there's no data, what we're doing is not necessarily deleting the time, but we're deleting kind of the time of data when we do an edit like that. So if you want the project to end specifically, I would, just go to the end here. If you right click, we could just see your seconds. Then you know what the value is, and then you can just say 03. We'll give it maybe 10 extra seconds. And now when we hit OK, then that will be limited. But that's probably the easiest way. But again, that particular function was set up for like deleting events in that time, not necessarily empty space. So you could just adjust like that. All right. So we see a question. Any chance of addressing the issues Mac users are experiencing with Mac OS Tahoe during tonight's live stream? And I do not mean a workaround for some specific issue. I just mean a general acknowledgement of the problems and how long they might take to fix or sort of update. I feel like we're in the dark over here. Please shine a little light. I apologize if it's not the place to address this sort of issues, or if it's already been covered in a previous live stream. If so, please direct me to the videos. I'd be happy to rewatch it. So, a lot of times, obviously, anytime that there's a Mac OS update, there's a lot of things that could go wrong that are out of our control. So I believe that all these, the vast majority of Steinberg, products are working on Tahoe. There's a lot of times it could be, I know if you have I have a system update that I saw scheduled for today or later tonight, and that will re-trigger a permissions issue that I would have to take my Yamaha Steinberg USB driver and tell it that Yamaha is a trusted source. So there's lots of, we'll call it and if you're on Mac OS, you understand the concept of doing the permissions dance where you have to grant permissions to a lot of different aspects. So I think Cubase has been working fine. Many audio interfaces have issues. Many third-party plugins have issues. So, we could test for Cubase, but if ARA is not updated, if, company-wise plugins aren't updated to work, but you're using those plugins in your project, your MIDI interface isn't updated for the latest operating system. And some people say, obviously, there's beta versions that come and, you could be testing this whole time. So, the beta versions often are changing constantly, especially at the end. So we try to do our best to be as quick, but we don't want to, as they do the QA cycle, the quality assurance cycle, there's a lot of things that need to be tested just for check for compatibility. So make sure that all, because Cubase is a program that we plug an audio interface and we plug devices into it. We have plugins, we have MIDI interfaces. So there's we make a product that things connect into and communicate with. So if those particular aspects are not updated, that could make Cubase seem very lethargic and like it's misbehaving. But often, once you get the green light from Steinberg, then everything should be fine on the Steinberg end, and we can't necessarily go to company X and say, hey, this isn't working on your stuff. There's a lot of, there is communication between the developers of companies if they run into an issue, but we can't necessarily, write the third-party company's code if they're not compatible with the latest OS. All right, let me jump back to a couple, see if we have more questions. All right, so we see Brian DeBear's question. When starting Cubase Pro 15 on my Windows 11 system, it takes forever to get through initializing VST 2.x plugin manager. Is this 2.x the manager number, or is it trying to find VST2 plugins? So that's trying to find VST2 plugins. So if you have the option of using their VST3 counterparts, I would recommend that. I know that there's some plugins that maybe have not been updated to VST3 that we all use and love, but VST3 has been out for 18 years at this point. So when we want to come over here, you could, maybe there's a little checkbox. I think it's kind of at the top where you could tell it maybe to not look for VST2 plugins. And then, so I would, so it could be, maybe it's a 32-bit VST2 plugin. It's trying to find a bridge, so there's and it could also be, as you're doing it, there could be like a window open in the background that's being obscured by another window. So check, just hit like your Alt tab and see if there's a window saying, okay, we can't find this license. We can't find an iLock license for this. We can't find this license. And it could be just something that's behind that screen, like an error message as well. But that would be that would indicate that it's looking for VST2 plugins. So if you could, choose to work in VST3, then I think you'd be in better shape. All right, great to see Daniela from Bochum, Germany on. Thanks for joining us this evening. All right, we have sound designer CK just saying hello, fellow Cubase users. All right, so we see, can you demonstrate the LUFS script feature, please? So I'm not smart enough to really understand LUFS scripts, but if we are going into, let's say if we have a Halion instrument, I could show you kind of where to access it. So we'll come over here to Halion. I'm not like software developer smart. But here, let's say we'll just do like a sample instrument here. And now we can, let's say if we do a new MIDI module. So if you needed to do like different LUFS scripts here, we could just say, okay, let's do a LUFS script here. And then if you wanted to see what the editor is of the LUFS script, that's how you could get it into Halion. But I'm not really LUFS script smart with that. But I know you can use it with Halion. So Jazz Dude has a great point. Says, never trust Microsoft or Apple's updates join 2 to 3 months later, if even necessary. So I try, personally, what I do is I try to use kind of the same operating system on my computer unless I really need to do it, like if something is not working. So I migrated from Windows 10 to 11 just because I needed to learn how to get around, little subtle things on Windows 11 better. But for my Mac, I tend not to update the operating system. Just, I find most of the changes to be pretty subtly evolutionary and nothing that's really kind of is worth kind of the hassle of incompatibilities and instabilities. All right, so music production software asks, in Cubase Pro 13, within the editor window and editing MIDI events, is there a way to get rid of the track name in the upper left region near the left locator position? All right, so let's say if I'm here, and we'll make this larger. So let's say we want to see like this particular name here, if it's kind of like, it's like in the way. So if you see this little icon here to show the part borders, you could just simply click on that icon, and that will get rid of the event name label right there. And if we're in the lower zone, same icon. So we could just if you, depending on what you have for kind of set up. So, but yeah, just right. Okay, so Jared Davis asks, would love to see the option in object slip mode, control plus alt plus drag over audio objects where it's quantizable in the grid. Is that possible? Yeah, usually when you're doing slip editing, it's often, so let's say if we're doing our slip editing here, so if I come and we could kind of just do our slip editing. So I think that it's not necessarily quantizable, because I think that, if you wanted it to be quantized, you could just come right over here. So let's say I have this particular transient here, and if I want to quantize that, let's say we're bars and beats. So now if I hit Q, and we have our quantize value here set to, let's say, eighth notes, that we could just kind of quantize there. Let's make it set to quarter notes. So we could kind of quantize. So often what happens, I remember, working on a session with kind of the legendary Phil Ramone, and, he had a timpani player that came in late on a particular project, and he's like, am I going to really have to, re-record kind of the whole thing because the timpani player missed the downbeat? He's like, I can't believe I'm going to have to redo this. And I was just like, okay, let's just take that particular timpani part and we could just slide that particular part there. So usually when you're doing kind of slip editing, I find that, you're just kind of nudging little things here and there so it doesn't snap to values, because you're often just kind of doing, repositioning that particular thing visually. So, because as you're doing slip editing, it's doing visual, and if you wanted it to snap at that point, you could snap the beginning and the end, but you're kind of moving the contents within the part. So, for me, often that edit is going to be more visually based, but okay. All right. Okay, so we see comment from Val, just says Greg says he's not software developer smart while explaining a whole program that's 40 plus years old into every detail. I'm just, when it comes down to it, I just made mistakes before other people, and I'm, just a dumb bass player. But, when it comes to like I'm really bad at Excel. I'm kind of like an Excel idiot. Like when it comes to like scripting, like anything like that, that's like a software developer. My son is really good at it, and he's in 7th grade, and he could just make stuff up, and I'm just look at him in kind of awe. But I think, I could explain kind of the intention well, but I'm sure I could learn it, but I don't have much free time. But thanks for the kind words. All right, so Jazzy Lamel just says, greetings, Greg. Is there a shortcut for the tap tempo that you could tell me about and demonstrate? So generally, when you just kind of enable tap here, and then you could just kind of hit the space bar. So let's say I want to figure out kind of what the tempo is going on here. So let's go back to, let's see if we had. All right, so let's say I wanted to get like a rough tempo of this particular song. All right, so let's say we're listening to it. So if I just clicked on tap, so I don't necessarily need like I could just So I just kind of click here. So I can say roughly maybe 124. So let's see if I put it on 124. So we have different options here. So if I say, okay, let's just make our tempo 124, 1240. So let's say if I just come here. So you could just, come right over here. Now, if you wanted to do tap tempo from MIDI, there's also another trick that you could do. So let's say I'll turn off my click track here. And I want to just add a MIDI track. So let's say I'll just mute this. You can put on instrument track, MIDI track. And I'm going to just record like a single note, and I'm going to put it like every beat. going to put it on the correct track. So it's here. I'll just make it a MIDI track here. Okay, so let's say I come. So I'm just hitting the down beats, tapping along. All right, so now I've kind of tapped quarter notes here. So what I want to do now is if we go to like the MIDI menu and we go to functions, then we can say calculate tempo from MIDI events. And we'll say I started counting at quarter notes or whole notes or one bar. And now we could create kind of like a tempo map like that as well. Okay, let me just reading through comments. All right, so we see K-Jack. When I use the draw tool in Cubase to lower loud parts, the volume jumps based on where I click and won't return to 0 dB. How can I reduce only specific peaks without changing the whole clip level? All right, so what I would do is maybe use the range tool. So let's say if I want to take this, I'm going to grab, like, let's say, okay, this part is too loud. So I could select the part that I want. We see like this little diamond appear in the center. And then we can just come right over here and adjust our gain like so without having to use the draw tool. So use the range tool. And then you could adjust down. So that might be a little more accurate. And then if you want it to come over here, we could select that particular range. And like we showed before, if we wanted to split that, so if I hit Shift X, and if I wanted to just undo that particular change, we can see the volume, and then I could just enter in 0 in the volume field. So you could do stuff like that and go back and change. But like quickly to make adjustments, just simply come right over here, grab the range tool, and go up, down like that. And it's pretty fast and accurate. All right, so we see music production software. It's a big capital thank you. So you're welcome. Hope it was helpful. All right, Easy K80 says, "Hi Greg, I found kind of a bug concerning my last question. When you want to overwrite a channel with a preset, it doesn't load the fader position, but inserts, EQs, etc. works. Thanks for the greetings." All right, so let's take a look. All right, so let's say I go to this bass track, and on this bass track I had my VST bass amp. I have a compressor plugin. Let me just switch that. Okay, so I have black valve. We will open up our channel EQ. Okay, let's come over here. Let's put on envelope shaper. Okay, and let's say that our volume level here, when we look at the fader, is minus 17. So I'm going to, let's go ahead and duplicate this particular track. Okay, so we'll duplicate this track. All right, so I'm going to move the fader up. Let's change the position of our plugins. Let me open up the channel EQ, and we'll do kind of the opposite. Okay, so I'm going to save this as a track preset. So I'm going to right click, and we'll say save track preset. We'll call this February 20th, 2026 bass. Okay, so when we look at our mix console, you can see that this is our track that we just saved, and now we want to apply that track preset. So let's come over here to user presets, track presets, audio. Let me just clear out the filter. All right, so here's our bass. All right, so I'm going to just drag this over, and let's see if the fader, we can see the fader if that jumps right there. Thought the fader would be all right. Let me just try it on a smaller project, see if it's okay. So let's say come here. Okay, so let's add a new track with that track preset. All right, so let's say if I move this one, this is our original track, this is our new track, drag this over on top. So it looks like it will maintain the fader position, but if we, seems like it, I would think that the fader position would change, but if we load this particular, if we double click, so let's say our fader here is down, if I double click to add a new track, the fader is preserved, but not when dragging it over. So I would think that the fader positions would be included. I will do some research on that to make sure, but thanks for pointing that out. Val just says, I bet Mr. Undo Jr. is going to be the best DAW developer ever. So, yeah, he's much better at software development, and he probably and he has a better musical ear than I do as well. So. All right, so we see from Daniela says, the reason I asked for a LUFS script is there's a modified version of the Duncan Auto Mix feature I need for bigger discussion, recording with 25 microphones. I did find it works better than other. So maybe it's the Dugan Auto Mix, Dan Dugan's technology. So, so generally, like Dugan Auto Mix is licensed by mix console companies. So if you have like a Yamaha DM series, I think even TF series will have auto mix, which is kind of set up for like corporate board stuff so that everyone, could kind of auto mix itself. But usually it's going to be, particular, technologies that's licensed. The Dugan auto mix is licensed in, and it's, generally for hardware mixers. See, Val says, I am too a dumb bass player, but honestly, why is it always bass players who produce the best and maybe the most musical instrument in the band? I think bass is interesting because you get kind of a different perspective, being kind of the bridge of harmony and rhythm, and you kind of actually define what the chords are. The chord really isn't defined until the bass player says it is. And I think also, bass player, a lot of bass players, like, I think of my role as a bass player as trying to make other people sound better. So I'm not trying to impress anyone. So hopefully, like my job as a bass player is, no one really notices me, but everyone else sounds great. Then I know I was successful as a bass player. All right, Steve Green asks, Greg, last week I had an MP3 that didn't really unmix too well in spectral layers. You mentioned a higher resolution would be best. What format would that be? So generally it's going to be like a full resolution WAV file. So if you have like a 24-bit 96K version of it, sometimes taking the MP3 and upsampling it doesn't really matter. But I know guys that do like game sound design. We had a series of audio interfaces that were discontinued, as manufactured by Yamaha and distributed by Steinberg, called the Steinberg AXR. So there's a Thunderbolt and a USB version. That's the audio interface I use in my studio. And, it does sample rates up to 384K. And a lot of people were like, oh, that's just stupid. Bats can hear it. But when you're actually doing like extreme time stretching and extreme analysis and processing of audio, having a lot more information will give better results when you're trying to time stretch something down 8 octaves. You have more data for it to interpret and to interpolate from. So sometimes, a full resolution, 16-bit 44.1 is going to have 10 times the information to work with compared to an MP3. And if you have a 24-bit version, better, 32-bit, a 24-bit 96K, it's just more information for the algorithms to work with. All right, so we see from KJack, hey Greg, that works, but how do I correctly adjust volume with the pencil tool in Cubase without changing the overall clip level or losing a 0 dB reference? So I would, I probably wouldn't use, like, you could use the pencil tool for that, but I may not personally do that. So I would probably, so if you wanted to come over and let's say if we draw in a value here, So I could just come to my nodes, and let's say if I put this node in, we could say, okay, I want this to go down to -6 dB. So as we do that, you can see the dB scale label on the right-hand side. So you could just simply kind of come over here and say, okay, I want that to be, -6.41. We can move this roughly to the same. And then I could select like both of those nodes if we wanted to. So once we kind of, so you could just, once we have those particular nodes, I could select those and say, okay, these need to be both at -6. So, you could do that. So as you just kind of click, you could adjust and see the value directly there. So even now, if I wanted to just take that particular node, and so you could do like kind of a 4-point edit if you want, and see the exact values. And this way, when you have the pencil tool selected, so you could select the particular node with the pencil tool and be able to adjust from the info line right there, or as you're adjusting, you could see the clip gain volume adjust directly over to the right and see the value. So let me know if that's helpful for you. All right, so Steve Green's asking, when I drag a pattern from C0 into an instrument track, Groove Agent 6 on playback, I played A# 0 fill pattern. I clicked the new look Omni button, but it still played A# 0. What am I doing wrong? All right, so let's take a look. Okay, so let's come over here maybe to the punch kit, the new kits. All right, so now so let's say we have this. All right, now let's listen to our dragged in pattern. And let's so say drag that, and let's do a fill, and then we'll go back to our and see if that's all kind of sounding as expected. Now we should have a fill here. Back to our original groove. So when in player mode, I just kind of put this into Omni. If you click here, I have kind of the player here. So this is what mine looks like, and just kind of dragging that out. So let me know if it's different on your end, if you have different behavior. We see Beverly just thanking Jazz Dude for links that he shared earlier. Okay, so we see from Bratman Studio, it just says the track layers icon is missing. How do I get it back? Or how to create layers in the drop down menu. So if it's on, like, if it's like the so let's say if we go to your audio track here, where if maybe it's the lanes, so where you could see the lanes. If you don't see that, what you could do is right click and go to your track control settings. So, yep, track control settings. Sorry for my brain cramp. And then just make sure that lane display type here is visible. So let me know if that's it or if it's in MIDI. So you might have to come over here to, let's say, the setup. So, but let me know if it's like the lanes. Then you can just do it as a track control. So let me know, Rick. All right, see some nice comments from Val as a bassist, fellow bassist. So we see question, can I use modulators to automate channel mutes but have it so that only one channel plays at a time, for example, between 4 channels of audio and a random modulator to swap between them without overlapping? So I don't think so, because I think the modulators are going to be tied to a single track. But let's see if we maybe put a modulator on a group track, but I don't think, I'm inclined to say no. I don't know a way of kind of randomly switching. Like we could recall snapshots, but that's not going to kind of be automatable or randomly done. So let's just try. All right, so say if I have these. Let's see if I send them to a group. Yeah, because I don't think that we could do modulators on a group track. Let's give it a shot. Yeah, so the modulators basically will work on the selected channel. I wonder if we could maybe do it in a sampler track or inside a Groove Agent. Let's see if we could maybe do it in Groove Agent. Yeah, so I don't think you could do it with the modulators, but you might be able.
Spend another 1,000 nights.
Let me see if I do. Okay, let me see. All right, and let's set the polyphony here to 1.
And I don't. So we tried, but did we try?
And let's see if we set this to random. And let's set maybe the sample start. All right, so let's see if we.
So we tried to spend another, and I don't know if I have it in me.
All right, so let's get a main.
To spend another 1,000, spend another 1,000, spend another
So we
1,000
do random
nights.
exclusive.
To spend another 1,000 nights. To spend another 1,000 nights.
Yeah, I could play around with it, but I don't think you could do it with modulators. But you might be able to do it in a play around, but you might be able to do it inside of Groove Agent and kind of switch between samples, but not different tracks. So let me know if you want me to, and I could work on it over the weekend to see if I get like a Groove Agent workflow kind of dialed in. All right, so a question from KJack says, in Very Audio, can I transfer pitch from one vocal track directly to another as a guide, or do I need to extract MIDI and then use that as a reference track? So we could use a reference track, but you know, what we do in Very Audio is each performance we will move, you know, we'll adjust Very Audio. So if I was here and we're in Very Audio, you know, so if I come here and let's say we had multiple performances and I, you know, do my tuning right there, then we can say, okay, that's great. So we do that, but this performance, what we're doing is actually, you know, taking the pitch for each of those segments and adjusting it. Now, a different performance may have slightly different pitch. So it's not kind of the end result that we do, but what we're doing in Very Audio is not saying play this pitch, is we're saying this pitch is 12 cents flat, move it up. This pitch is 12 cents sharp, move it down. So kind of automatically copying that over, you know, may not be applicable if the other recording is off. But what you can do very easily in Very Audio is just kind of come over here and say, okay, I want to take this. And if you're looking for kind of a quick solution, just say, okay, I want to quantize the pitch. Double click. Let's go to Very Audio. And, you know, once we do this, we can say, okay, let's edit Very Audio, quantize the pitch. So if I had to do something like super fast and quick, I would just come right over here and again, quantize pitch, and you could do that pretty easily for all. And if you're looking for kind of a quick solution to fix a lot of tuning stuff to make it fast, I would just, choose to quantize the pitch of those different segments. Because if the other recording isn't the same amount out of tune, which probably it's not, then, the changes that you make to alter the pitch to make it in tune won't work for the other segments, for the other audio files. Great. Okay, reading through comments here. All right, so you see from DaVinci Girl, it says, yes, I know it's a patent for the hardware, but this is a very old technique since it was a long time, but there exists software solutions. Sound devices have it as an extra paid, and Zoom also has it free built in. So I don't think that those are kind of as effective as the Zoom, as a Dugan Auto Mix. Okay, he says, but I look for an auto mixer in Cubase and did not find one. I do not know if there's an auto maker in Cubase. It's able for 25 microphones. The advanced script in Reaper can be used for up to 32 channels. I mean, so, do you want to do it after the fact, or are you expecting it? Because a lot of people like the Dugan Auto Mix because for a live meeting, like a panel discussion, you do that. If you just have the tracks and you want them all to be consistent, you could just simply select all the tracks and normalize them after the fact. But if you wanted it to be processed in real time, which is where people often use an auto mix, you could do that. And you could go into Wavelab or Cubase and do like a meta normalizer. Wavelab has a meta normalizer function. You could normalize multiple tracks in Cubase, but what makes a Dugan Auto Mix unique is that it's doing it in real time on the fly as part of the mixer, so that the sound guy can just kind of take a nap and not worry about turning someone's mic on for kind of a corporate audio gig, panel discussion, corporate kickoff meeting type thing with multiple speakers, etc. But if you wanted to do it after, it's just kind of normalizing. So we see Val says, so I recently got the Absolute 6 as my prize from the trivia. Do you think the upgrade today is worth it? I mean, let alone for the new Groove Agent 6. Yeah, I definitely think it's worth it. You get the Axe, was it Machina or Machina? You get, it's like the Etude piano. You get Tails guitar. Also, just like a great, quick, just a wonderful, sometimes like just getting fresh presets can make a big difference. You get a new Backbone library, obviously new Groove Agent, but I was just having a really great time, just going through like some of the new Carrier 8, check out some of these presets in here. Stuff you never really think of FM synthesis as doing. And we're still in the B's alphabetically. So, I mean, just like great presets. So I think it's definitely worth the upgrade to the new Absolute and take advantage of all the great stuff. All right, so we have Tio Gabershek 886 says, I'm having a problem when moving tracks in the mix console. I have to try multiple times before it moves. Am I doing something wrong? You know, make sure that you don't have, you know, maybe it's in a group or linked group, but let's go ahead and just add a bunch of audio tracks here. Take a look. And there's keyboard shortcuts that could be utilized as well. So let's say if I'm here, so I want to take this particular track and hold the left mouse button down. I see the green line. Then I could just say, okay, I want audio 20 coming after 9. So seems pretty straightforward. So let me know if I'm doing something different than you are. And Uno Memento is just mentioning that if you have a wireless mouse and keyboard, change the batteries. All right, wonderful to see Graham Witcher joining from Oxford. All right, so we see Greg from Steve Green asks, Groove Agent issue in the college-bound pattern drag and drop kind of freaks out on F-sharp 0 and playback. I didn't change the Omni kit. It's grayed out. All right, let's take a look. Let's do a new project since we have lots of. Keep it nice and clean. Okay, said SE. Okay, so let's take this. All right, so let's listen to our player. All right, so I'm just going to drag that over. Okay, all right, so let's see, that sounds different. Let me just come over here. Okay, let me just see if I turn this. All right, let me try the pattern port. Yeah, so try switching when you go to, like when you click here in the pattern port. So I'll try just to load up that preset again. But yeah, there's a little, so if you click here, make sure that the pattern port. Yeah, so if you kind of just click right here, just to the left, to the right of follow transport, and then see if you select the pattern, MIDI port settings there. So give that a try. All right, so Michael Teams is granted Graham Witcher 1 gallon of Mango Supreme ice cream. All right, so see from DaVinci Girl, just asking Jazz Dude, says, are you familiar with Auto Mix and Cubase? It's a paid job for a bigger company event. So, generally it's going to be, there's, for the Auto Mix to kind of work, it would, you could, put compressors on every single channel if you have 25 audio inputs. But you're probably, I would say the right tool for that. There's a lot of stuff that kind of is like Dugan that's not nearly as effective as Dugan. So if you don't have a mixer or an audio interface that has Dugan Auto Mix, I would, utilize that if you want to. That would be the right tool for the job. All right, wonderful to see Gareth on. Just curious how the weather is for you, Gareth. I was just watching about all the flooding in Spain and Portugal. So you were in my thoughts. All right, so we see from Tio Gabershak, just says, the thing is, I want to select a track. I try to move it. It won't. I have to select the other track and then just grab the track that I'd like to move. All right, so let me just come over here. I'll hide my input. Let's see if they're grouped together, if that makes a difference. So let's say if we have all of these tracks in a folder, all right, so I want to move Groove Agent 9 over, no problem. Let's see if our folder, if we have group editing enabled. Again, no problem. Let's see if you have, maybe if you have channels that are linked. Yeah, I mean, and one thing, is just try, just grabbing, so yeah, it just seems kind of work as expected on my end. Okay, so we see Jackie Barr says, I'm trying Melodyne with Cubase, but for some reason when I'm in the detached Melodyne window, the Cubase tools show through the Melodyne window like it's partially transparent if I'm hovering. All right, so let me see. I don't have Melodyne and license on this computer, but let's say if I come over here. Okay, so let's say for this particular track, I want to go to, well, try it with Wavelab and spectral layers. All right, so now we're loading up. So I will detach the window here. So don't see anything transparent. Let me try spectral layers as well. Maybe it's some kind of clever Melodyne feature. All right, so now we'll grab spectral layers. So that all still kind of seems, I don't see any transparency issues with that, but let me know if I'm doing anything differently than you are. Or maybe someone else. I have Melodyne on my studio computer. I tend to use Very Audio, but I could check it out. Sorry, my chat field jumped. All right, Jazzy Lamel says, hey, Greg, I want to know, is it possible to use my Roland V-Drums with Groove Agent? And if so, will the drums sync up correctly to the module? So let's say we open up Groove Agent. So yeah, you can obviously play. So let's come over here to the player. And then you'll see, like, let's say maybe the kit here. So let's say if you go to the kit settings, all you'd have to do is, you see this little like drumstick on a drum. If you click there, then you could select, like, okay, I have my Roland TD series, or I have an Alesis or Yamaha, you know, so different electronic drum kits have presets. So just kind of click right here, and that should do all the mapping for your Roland electronic drum set. Okay, so we see Steve Leeds just says how to use Cubase 14 Pro for mastering live tracks originally recorded in 1970, open reel, quarter-inch tape, then transferred to WAV files, basically a mono mix, no stems, loud drum, soft vox, soft bass. Thanks. Okay. So Spectral Layers is a great tool for this if you have Spectral Layers Pro. Let me see if I have in my recent project list. So let's say this is a project that I don't have the MIDI information, I don't have multi-tracks, or on a 1-inch tape machine. And if so what we could do is, you know, load Spectral Layers Pro, and you could get the trial version if you wanted to. And once you have Spectral Layers, load it as an extension, just like we were doing earlier. And the Melodyne question, you could go to modules, and you'll say unmix song. So as we do this, so I'm going to take this full screen. So let's say I want the drum softer. So it'll take a couple minutes to kind of go through. But let's say I want to put effects on the vocal. What I could do is just drag that vocal into the project window. then it's going to play that particular file. So
tell you something everyone knows by now, something that everyone's figured out. Miss Judy, deep in your heart they say that you're digging your own grave, and they say you walk a foot above the ground. Does it bring you up to hear your friends talk down? And when a different broken ego rose, coming back to give you what you're owed. Rude Judy, I wouldn't know by now if I didn't figure it out. Rude Judy, I wouldn't know.
and if you want to put effects on it,
Then you turn away somehow. You caught up on an attitude and it shows. Stepped on one too many toes. That I doesn't stand and couldn't offer more. But then what do you need friends for? And they say you walk a foot above the ground. Does it bring you up to hear your friends talk down? And when a different broken ego rose, coming back to give you what you're owed. Rude Judy, I wouldn't
so,
know
or
by
if too soft, too loud, you could just simply unmix it directly from the 2-track. So Spectral Pro is a perfect solution for that. It's saved so many projects for people. It's been just kind of a wonder tool. All right, so we see from Batman Studio, says Greg, thanks, that was it. I guess Cubase 15 has new track defaults. I didn't think, for example, I don't need the little volume control since channel volume's on the side. Perfect. All right, is that good? All right, so question, do you think it's useful to set up different mix buses at the same time? You can maybe dry, wet, or sidechain send to before summing. My boss called me crazy, but this week I tried. What do you say? You know, anything that works, however you get there, is good. If it sounds better, it's good. Sometimes, you know, it's not something that I would probably do, but there's absolutely no wrong way of doing something. Sometimes people will do stuff and it creates phase problems. They're like, oh, it sounds whiter, yeah, but it's out of phase, and it's, and now when you try to play it on a mono speaker, it could have impacts. So, however you score the goal, like an ugly soccer goal, some guy, did a bicycle kick from 40 yards out and landed on his back and it ended up in the corner of the net. That counts just the same as if someone just kicked the ball in from, got past the ball 1 yard away and the goalie slipped. Same point. So, however you get there, I think is fine. So there's no really wrong or right technique. So I think it's just figuring out how to get your own sound. That's the important thing. All right, so we see from Daniela, it says normalize is not enough, and also compressors. This is the quality. This is not the quality the customers expect. It's a live event. So I would say if you're doing a live event, I would just get a console that has Dugan Auto Mix. That's kind of what probably the AV requirements and what the expectations are. So, and you could always rent like a Yamaha DM3 or a DM7, I believe a TF console. Also, the DM3 has kind of its own auto mix, but it's not Dugan. But if you have a rental, check out like a Yamaha TF console. Does do Dugan, I believe. All right, so we see from Tio Gabershek says, do you always have to grab on the meter to move a track? I find that a convenient way to grab, because kind of wherever I'm at, I can, just move particular tracks around. So let me just add some more audio tracks here. So when in doubt, I will click here to select the track, just because it's a big target. You're not going to, I see some people will grab a track, try to select a track by clicking on a fader, and they move the fader accidentally. So the target that I always go for when moving a track is just to select it by going into the particular meter area. So you could just come again right over there and move it. You don't necessarily have to click there. You could click at the bottom to select the track, but sometimes you might, if you accidentally double click, you could accidentally the potential of renaming a track unexpectedly is there. All right, so we see from Daniela, just as in the software needs, that any microphone latency is corrected. We do very often make for weddings, auto mix and post, have Zoom recorders, sound devices on the set, script solutions are very stable and do not have much latency. Yeah, because the latency is like a real critical factor, and the buffer size. Dukin is expecting a particular buffer size and latency to work with. All right, great to see Tiago joining from Brazil. All right, Captenergy Music asks, is there a way to push a modulator to a physical device? I tried last night, was unable to, and received a message stating that modulators were not available for the type of track MIDI in Cubase Pro 15. So generally the modulators spit out too much data to effectively be sent to an external MIDI device. So the bandwidth over the USB, it will probably get better once more devices are MIDI 2.0 and the bandwidth is significantly wider and improved. But currently, I think they were hoping to get it in, but, on testing it and the practical applications were that the modulators would send so much data that often the devices would get overloaded. So one of the other kind of benefits of using VST instruments, but the modulators are going to be for VST instruments for bandwidth reasons. All right, so we see from Tio Gabershak says, I've just tried in Cubase when clicking on a meter, it works perfectly, but on a channel name, it doesn't. So, yeah, try, it's my habit that I've always, this is a much smaller target to grab than this. And another cool thing that you could do once you're here, like in like the full screen, I think now we could do it here. So I complained enough where if you just hover in the meter area that you could just use your mouse scroll wheel, even in the lower mixer now, to navigate freely. So, so a lot of times when I want to select or navigate, I could just come right over here. And what's even like super smart about it is as we do this, we can't land not on a meter area. So wherever you stop, it's always going to be in a meter area for you. So if maybe try to get in the habit of doing that, because there's additional functionality and benefits as well. All right, so we see from Gareth that Bilbao escaped the worst. It was more in Andalusia and Catalonia. This says, thanks for the thoughts. Yeah, we were hoping to go on vacation to Portugal next month, but it seems like it's pretty flooded out in a lot of areas. So if anyone lives in Portugal, let me know what the conditions are instead of just kind of looking at an American news site. So we see from Daniela, says, Greg, can I send you an email with the LUFS script? So I think the LUFS script that you can, but the LUFS script is only going to really in Cubase work in Halion, so I don't think it's going to work. And again, if you want it like an auto mix solution, get a hardware mixer that's kind of, just like you probably wouldn't use a live sound mixer for recording studio purposes. It's kind of the right tool for the particular task. All right. Okay, so we see from Jared Davis, what's the best approach to follow a particular track's pitch? Example, I have a bass line riff, and I want other audio channels to follow the note changes to stay in key. Is chord tracks the best way? So if we have a chord track, so let's just come here. We'll come over here. All right, and let's just grab. All right, so let's say we have this going on. Let's add a chord track. Okay, so what I would probably do, all right, so we add the chord track. All right, so say we have this. So what I'm going to do is select like this bass part. And this is generally kind of works for, not polyphonic instruments. So like bass, vocals. But if we go to the chords, we could say follow the chords. And we'll say so you could just simply tell it to, follow the particular chords. So if you wanted to not follow chords, so you could do that, but it could be hard. I mean, if you do just a quick, like very audio analysis, you could see kind of what the pitch is, but the other ones won't automatically kind of follow based on that. But if you spend a little time, you could match them up, but it's not kind of automated. Great, wonderful to see Michael Pierce on as the Button Man. Thanks for joining us from Grand Chapel Studios and outside of London. See Graham Witcher saying it's soggy in the UK. Says no hose pipe ban for a while. All right, so Steve Green says, Greg, Groove Agent issue solved. Clicked on the little routing arrow and changed to pattern port. Workflow continues. That's great. And thanks for letting me know. All right, great to see Sable Winters on. All right, so Bratman Studios saying you may have to do to Jazzy Lamel, if you have like a bunch of extra toms on your drums, you may have to do some additional mapping. Gareth is accusing me of getting all manual content again. Okay. Okay, so you see from Deemster 78, so sorry, still not clear on the event snap points. Why isn't always at start / cut point of an event when cutting events, or is there a shortcut key to set it back to the start of the event? So let's say if we are here, let's go to, let's say our definition. If we move, I think, the cursor to the start of the event, if we go audio, we can say snap points to cursor. I think there's a setting. Yeah, snap point to cursor. And then that will automatically move it to the beginning of the event. So generally, it doesn't go in the middle of the event unless there was, it was accidentally moved in some way. So it usually defaults to the beginning of a particular event. But if you move the cursor to the beginning of the event, then you could do the snap point to cursor. Gareth is saying the mysterious button, the button man's identity must never be revealed. All right, you see David M. checking in from Liverpool. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we see, so the button man just asking, just wondering what was new in Absolute 7. 6 is so enormous, it's kind of difficult to tell. So Groove Agent 6 is one of the new things. So some of the instruments that we will get, so let's add a quick instrument track. You'll get a backbone extension called Fracture. So when we come over here, so we're going to do, so all sorts of different presets there. When you get into Groove Agent, so it comes with Groove Agent 6. So if you are working with Groove Agent, so one of the things that you wanted, Michael, was when you come over, so let's go to Groove Agent. This is the button man request. So let's say if I come over here and we go into our sample, if we go to the amplifier section, that you could invert the phase or polarity. So you could do that on samples. You get new Groove Agent kits, including Color Punch, which is kind of more beat agent style. You'll get a Also, punch kit, so a brand new high quality acoustic kit. You'll get some new loops. You'll also get a new, when we go to Halion or Halion Sonic, you get Etude, which is a wonderful piano. You get these Carrier 8, which is FM synthesis. You get Ax Machina, which is going to be like a really high quality kind of metal guitar. Etude piano, so it's a Yamaha CFX. You get, I think the lo-fi piano might come with it. Other new things, you get Tails, the orchestra colors. So some of the new instruments there. Also, a new like vintage expansion kit for Retrolog. So lots of great stuff that's in Absolute. So wonderful update. So the guys did a wonderful job with that. See, Gareth just saying that Backbone is an extremely versatile sound maker. Yeah, it's a wonderful sound design tool. All right, Jazzy Lamel says, hey, Greg, you mentioned with Groove Agent that I could work with my Roland V-Drums, but when I'm ready to export the drums out, can I export the drums out separately? So, yeah, let's come over here. So let's say we have, let's say, a Groove Agent kit here. All right, so I'm going to drag from the player. And then if we just come right over here, we go to MIDI. And then we could say dissolve part and separate pitches. And now each particular sound will be isolated. So you have kick, snare, all on different tracks. See, the button man just says polarity. He's happy. I fought for that feature for you. See, button man says he'll be doing some shopping tomorrow. All right, Graham Witcher says, who needs anything else but Cubase to make great music? There's just so much to discover. So, all right, let's go to a couple questions. I know we had a couple more questions that were sent in. All right, so we had a question. It says, hello, what is the fastest way to make a small part from an audio track and insert it directly into a third-party plugin, SynPlant, as synth sound? So a lot of times when we want to, get particular sounds, so let's come over here. Let's say I want to do, we'll say just a quick beat agent kit. Here, I'll just cut. All right, so if I wanted a particular sound, and this could depend upon the actual instrument. So many instruments will allow us to just grab a range of that particular instrument, and I could, like in Groove Agent, I could take that range and drag and drop. And we could see exactly, we see that, just that portion, we see what was happening before or after. So that when I grabbed the range tool, that automatically just kind of dragged it over. I think we could do the same with Halion, the sampler. Let's give it a try. Let's say with our sampler track. So now when we come here, so we could take just a portion into the sampler track. So it really, not all instruments will allow you to do that. But there are instruments that do. So I don't have a license of SynPlant, but if it supports kind of drag and drop and kind of rendering like the start and end locator positions, then it could work for you. Okay, next question. How can I determine and find the sample in Drum Loops Pro Archive? For example, when it isn't shown in the track, because most of the drum samples have the same name. So let me see if I can find... Hang on one second, I'll clear my throat. All right, so not sure where that is, but I'm not sure if it's like a groove agent. But let me just see if there's a drum loops library here. Okay, so how can I determine and find the sample in Drum Loops Pro Archive? Why isn't it shown in the track? So if this is the Drum Loops Archive, then it may not be, but let me just see if it's maybe a groove agent type of thing. Yeah, so I'm not sure if, and maybe I think it's George, but if you want to let me know where the Drum Loops Pro Archive is, if it's like one of the sample sets, because we could also, there's the Pro Instrument Bundle, but I don't think that has any drums. So if we, the Pro Instrument Bundle, so I don't think there's any drums in there, but let me know if it's like a groove agent preset or just loops, and I'd be happy to kind of look for it. All right, so we had a question, how to take an entire project from 145 beats a minute to 185 beats a minute easily. All right, so let's say my project here is 100 beats a minute. Okay, so I have audio, so we listen to the project. Now when I look at the project, if I recorded it into Cubase, Cubase will automatically apply a tempo stamp. And we can see that tempo stamp when we go to our pool window, so that's Control or Command plus the letter P. So we can see, okay, when we do this, all of my tempos are, for the audio files that we recorded. When we recorded them, the metronome was set to 100 beats per minute. And what we want to do now is just to come here, select all of the audio files, and we could just turn on musical mode. Once musical mode is enabled, all of these files will become tempo followers, tempo parasites. So now whatever tempo I type in, let's say from 100 to 120, all the tracks, let's say I want to go to 140, I want to go slower, so once the tracks are in musical mode, once it knows what the origin tempo is, at that point you could just simply, once they're all in musical mode enabled, just type in a new tempo or draw in tempo, accelerandos or retards, where it speeds up and slows down, and then you have complete access, and all the audio and MIDI tracks will automatically follow along. Okay. So question from last live stream says, I'm the one that asked you earlier about morphing samples in Halion 7, similar to MPC's expressive pads. What I'm trying to achieve is loading 2 samples into Halion 7 and smoothly morphing between them using the mod wheel as a default mod wheel position. Only layer 1 should play, and I increase the mod wheel. It should gradually fade into layer 2. Okay. I think I figured this out. I was pretty close last time. Okay, so let's say I have an instance of Halion. All right, and I have 2 files. Let's say I have this file, and then a guitar file. And I want to load these into Halion and kind of morph between them using the modulation wheel. So let's go ahead and open up an instance of Halion. We're going to go into our sample instrument to start. What I want to do now is I'm going to just drag and drop, let's say, my Rhodes patch. I'm going to drag and drop that. All right. Now, when we see this, we want to have this kind of program tree so we could go to load, but we could also see a program tree. What I want to do, we're going to select kind of the top level here, and we see these 3 horizontal icons. Some people say it looks like a sandwich. We'll add, I'm going to put this into, so that's its own layer, but I've made a new layer. And what I want to do in this layer is grab my guitar sample, and I'm going to drag and drop that into layer 2. Okay, so now when I play, all right, so I have both samples playing. This will automatically map them across all of the keys. We can do individual samples if needed. But now we want to do layers. So I'm going to right click on sample layer 1. And let's say I want that to start off. And we're going to go to new, to MIDI module, to what's called under conditional to Megatrig. We'll right click and let's open the editor for the Megatrig. Let's say the first thing we want is a note on message. And then we also want to say, okay, we're going to do a note on message followed by a controller. So we'll say our controller we want to use in this case is modulation. So I'm going to say, let's go 0 to 80. Okay, and then where we see note off velocity, or we see new notes, I'm just going to say held notes. Now I'm going to do something very similar on layer 2. So again, we'll go to new, MIDI module, conditional Megatrig. Right click and we open the editor. So I want to send a note. And then we're going to send this to our modulation. And then I want this from 127 through 50. So we'll have some overlap between those two. All right, so now if I did this right, I'm going to move my modulation wheel. You'll see that my modulation wheel move here. And as I move the mod wheel up, and let me just check this Megatrig condition one more time to make sure I got the held All right, so on new notes, so we're going to say held notes. So I'm going to hold the note down and move the mod wheel. And then we could just morph between those two samples like so. So until 80 or until about 50, then the guitar comes in. Then we could just kind of morph between those two samples. So just watching the modulation wheel here. So, and you could obviously choose better samples than I did. All right, so let's go back to our live questions. Thanks for sending questions in advance. You could always send it to clubcubase@steinberg.de. Okay, let me just find my spot where it was. All right, so we see from Jared Davis, will we see a link functionality in Cubase with other DAWs and visual software like Resolume or Resolume? I remember Cubase 5 had Rewire. So a lot of those, you know, when we're dealing with our audio engine in Cubase, everything in Cubase is going to be based on the sample. So not a lot of other kind of things that synchronize or kind of like MIDI based, and they don't really have the proper resolution to sync audio. So Rewire was doing that, but Rewire was developed between Steinberg and Propeller Heads, which turned into Reason Studios, which is now Lander, and they dropped all support because they basically turned their Reason Studios into a VST plugin, so it didn't need to do Rewire, and they didn't want to do any maintenance on it, so they dropped support. So we would like to, you know, Cubase will synchronize, you know, with MIDI timecode and audio clock to other programs, but a lot of programs, while they say they sync, it's not actually synchronizing. And if you're recording audio based on where the audio clock is drifting, that's bad. So, you know, it's kind of like the Earth. If the Earth was rotating and it's sped up and slowed down, you know, the Earth feels still to us as habitants because it's going a steady rate and we're all used to it. But if it started speeding up and slowing down, probably everything would feel like a massive earthquake all the time. And that's kind of what's going on with improper synchronization, because we need to be at, you know, 44,000 or 96,000 samples per second and be able to resolve the clocks. So there's not a lot of solutions that offer professional synchronization between different programs. All right, so we see Gareth says the only extra thing he needs is a kazoo. All right. All right, David M. says he nearly missed his ice cream. All right, so we have Amado Solo. Hello from Southern California. What's the best way to audio loops so that they play in the current project tempo? Thank you. So whatever tempo that you have, really all you would need to do with loops that are kind of dragged in is just to, if they have tempo information, so just about every loop will have tempo information, you could just select it and then place it into musical mode. As you go to import loops, So let's say if I'm here and, okay, now I have my tempo set, we could choose to, as we're auditioning, that we could just, if we have this turned on, we could audition and place the loops, and then as I drag, this will automatically enable musical mode so that it's going to be in sync and follow the tempo. So if you have a loop that's not following the tempo and it has like a tempo stamp information like we discussed with speeding up the multi-track rock project, just simply select it, put it into musical mode, and then again it will follow the tempo of the project. All right, so we see Jazzing the Mel says, hey, Greg, as mentioned before, with Groove Agent, I meant the drums be exported separately as audio 24-bit 48K. Okay, so let's... Okay, so let's say I just have a part in my project. Okay, so let's say. Okay, so we go to, let's say, our mixer here in Cubase. So if you wanted to, you could, just like we showed before, if you want to select the MIDI event, come here to dissolve part, you could separate the pitches, and then just come right over here and render in place. And then you could, let me choose not to mix it down, but if we go to render in place, and now we have the individual files, our kick, broom, etc. So you could just come right over there. All right. Gareth is just telling everyone be aware of the tempo parasites. Okay, reading through questions. All right, so we see from the Sludge 7.8, how can I have the chord track always display on top even when I scroll down the many other tracks? Okay. All right, so I'm going to add a chord track. Okay, I'm going to just put this at top. Let's add some additional tracks. Okay, so what you could do is go to the project menu, and we will come right over here, and there is a divide track list. All right, so now my chord track is on the top, and as I scroll down, I could have tracks that are fixed to the top so that my chord track is always visible, regardless of what my scroll position. So this kind of gives us two different areas of the project window. So again, go to Project menu to divide track list. Ratman Studio says mod wheel blend was insane. That's good. Sorry, I couldn't figure out last Tuesday. All right, so it says, sir, I'm unable to find glue compression to complete the mixing part. Suggest an alternate option in Cubase stock plugin to complete the process. All right, so let's... All right, so I'm just going to come over here, let's say on our master.
You were easy to love. You were easy to love. Easy to keep all those promises we made.
Just bypass these.
There was no way we could know. Will we ever understand the way
So black valve is always a great compressor to kind of start with.
Can you feel it now? Was it meant to be? Or will the memories all fade in time? Now that we've been apart, do you feel it in your heart? Can we really stay in love forever? Will you remember this love? Will you remember this love? Will you don't let it go? Make it last forever. Will you remember my love? Will you remember forever? 'Cause I won't forget the love that I once knew.
And even if you want to take just like some of the other compressors are great as well.
Another love, another day. Somebody else could come along and steal your heart away.
So maybe you have like a slow attack,
I can do nothing stays
fast
the same.
release.
I wish there was another way.
And there's probably different presets.
What it means to me. Let's not let this precious love slip away. So baby, hold me near, chase away my fears. Together we can make this last forever. Remember this love. Don't let it go. Make it last
That's a nice glue compressor there. So but you know, pretty much any of the compression can work, you know. But give like the vintage compressor or black valve are great choices as well. All right, so we see from Ahmed DeSolo, I have a MIDI track with some chords in it. How can I trigger multiple instruments to play the chords from a single MIDI track? All right. Okay, so this works for MIDI tracks, but not necessarily instrument tracks. All right, so I'm going to start off with a MIDI track, and I will just kind of come over here and start with a rack instrument. So let's say I want to go to Pad Shop. We're going to create a, so let's come over here. Okay, so now just find something a little, it's not as incredibly All right, and now I'm going to add another rack instrument or MIDI device. So let's come over here to Retrolog. Okay, so now, and let's add Halion Sonic. Let's add FM7 in Halion Sonic, one of the new Carrier 8. All right, so what I want to do now is take this pad shop track, and then if we go to MIDI inserts, or not MIDI inserts, but MIDI sends. So we can do this from MIDI tracks, again, not from, and I'm going to say, let's send this out to Retrolog. I'm going to turn it on, and then let's send this out to my Halion Sonic. So now I play one sound. And then we could have multiple so all from one particular track. Okay, so we see Vince joining from Winnipeg. Thanks for joining us. All right, we'll see if there's any more questions that pop up. Give it another minute or so. Thanks for all the great questions. Sorry my voice is a little rough sounding. I'm happy I got through it without having to swallow cough drops every 10 minutes. And we'll be back on Tuesday starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. Give it another minute, see if there's other questions that are popping in. If not, we'll wrap up just about 5 minutes early. Great C Capital Razor on. Let me see. Thanks for the kind words from Chaz Dude and the Button Man. Jared Davis says, this has been great. Thanks, Greg. So Val says, I'm super happy. Thanks for all your help again today, Greg. Get well soon. The best to the U.S. and to you, to your family. Thank you very much. All right. We have Trolls, St. Germ, maybe, or St. Germ says, have a great weekend and lots of useful stuff. All right, well, it looks like we're out of questions. Again, thank you for all the wonderful questions. Hope that everyone has a safe and healthy weekend. So, Daniel, I did see the email come in, so I'll take a look at it. I don't think there's much that I could do with the LUFS script if it's not really designed for anything in Cubase, but I'll take a look at it. All right, so with that, I think we are officially out of questions. Thanks again for all the wonderful questions. Look forward to seeing everyone on Tuesday. Everyone stay safe and healthy, and we'll see you on Tuesday. Thank you so much. Goodbye.